Recently I made a video trying to connect as many Eve music videos as possible into a single timeline, and for the sake of staying on track, I had to skim through a lot of things. This video is my attempt at going back and digging deeper into one of those things. It's probably one of the most obvious mysteries, and hence the only one that I've actually seen anyone debate, which makes it the perfect one to dig into first. In the music video Last Dance, we see forms for 5 characters: Bun from Literary Nonsense, Karukuru from Dramaturgy, Platoon from Outsider, Dancer from Last Dance itself, and someone. This person's face is blacked out, but they're shown to be subject 1 of this place. In the last video, I said that this was the protagonist of Demon Dance Tokyo, but I've done some more research and found more candidates, so let's find out if that conclusion still holds up. The very first thing we should do is pin down what exactly these forms even are. Thankfully, this is shown to us pretty explicitly in the manga Empty Memories. These come from a reference room at the secret base of a government organization dedicated to dealing with Zingai-related threats, codenamed the Flower Shop. Anyone who the Flower Shop thinks is worth keeping an eye on has one of these files, even if they themselves don't have a Zingai. For example, the protagonist, Ray, has a friend who doesn't have a Zingai of his own, but still has a file on account of being involved in a Zingai-related accident in the past. Given that this scribbled-out person is labeled as number 1, they must be the first person the Flower Shop ever looked into. However, that only helps us if we know how old the organization is. And we don't. Or at least I don't. It might be in one of the books that haven't been translated yet, but using only the information I have available, all we know is that it's been around for at the very least 8 or 9 years as of the first How to Eat Life book. And that's at least 3 years before Last Dance. So at the time that we're seeing it, the file is from 11 or more years ago. So with that, I did some digging and found 5 potential candidates for who this Subject 1 could be. First, we have the one I talked about in the timeline video, the Demon Dance Tokyo boy. I discovered this theory from a Tumblr post that I sadly can't find anymore, but I remember the main piece of evidence was that the boy's shirt aligned with what little we can see from the photo. That's not much, but when I did my own digging, I found a lot more. First, there's the fact that he's from the first original Eve music video, which would explain him being listed as Subject 1. It would be a nod to him being the first character. Then there's the fact that the boy calls himself a disappearing boy on multiple occasions, and says, "we who are not even listed in textbooks." These forms aren't exactly textbooks, but they are held in a book, so that's kind of in the ballpark. He could have been deemed unimportant and stripped from the records, leading to or reinforcing existing self-worth issues. Adding to that, Demon Dance Tokyo is the only music video to not be in Eve's playlist. It can't be that he's ashamed of it or something, because it still gets referenced and it's not unlisted from the channel. In fact, it was never in the playlist according to the Internet Archive. That's all stuff I already talked about in the last video, though. The last thing, and the one I think is probably the most interesting, is that all 5 of these characters were created by the same person. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Aren't all the characters created by the same person? They're all Eve's music videos. They are all music videos for Eve, and he does give some level of direction for all of them. But he has several different animators, and he picks one to work with depending on who he feels would do the best job with each song. And if you look at who animated what, things start to make a lot more sense. While the majority of the music videos do seem to take place in the same timeline, the different animators' music videos each generally take place in their own little boxes, excluding small cameos. For example, the animator Waboku made As You Like It, Tokyo Ghetto, Bomb Kitchen End, Don't Replay the Boredom, and Bokurano. which tend to reference each other a lot. For example, the same playground appears in As You Like It and Baumkuchen End, and characters from both As You Like It and Tokyo Ghetto appear throughout Don't Replay the Boredom, and appear on the poster for the music video. The only real exception here is the animator Mariyasu, whose first music video, How to Eat Life, was a direct sequel to Tokyo Ghetto. Now, the reason I went on that whole tangent is because Last Dance was made by the animator Ma, and at the time Last Dance released, this animator had made 4 other music videos: Literary Nonsense, Dramaturgy, Outsider, and Demon Dance Tokyo. If the Demon Dance Tokyo boy is Subject 1, then that lines up perfectly with the forms. There's really only one problem here, but it's easy to explain away. This file has to be at least 8 years old by the time of the How to Eat Life books, since it's the first file the flower shop made, and this music video takes place at least another 3 years after that. That's a minimum of 11 years. Doesn't this boy seem a bit young to have a file from 11 years ago? I thought about that for a while, and the thing is, he's at least 20 since he's drinking in public without a problem. But that would still make him an elementary schooler when the file was created. I guess that's not too far-fetched, looking at what little we have of the photo. And besides, they might update the pictures, since Dancer's file appears to be far earlier than the other 3, but the picture is up to date. With that out of the way, this feels like a pretty open and shut case, right? I thought so too, until I started really thinking about this next option. I first heard this idea from the YouTube channel Eve Explained. They said they believe Subject 1 is Seiki Otogiri from Tokyo Ghetto because of the order of the papers. We have Literary Nonsense, Dramaturgy, and Outsider, which are all in release order. And then the Subject 1 paper is in between Outsider and Last Dance. The only music video in between those two that connects to the overarching lore is Tokyo Ghetto. This idea fits really well with the lore too. In the novels, it's said that the flower shop has been searching for Seiki for a long time. In fact, in the earliest chronological event to feature them, they were chasing Seiki. This would fit really well with him being the first person to ever have a file. Under that idea, the reason he's blacked out would probably be because he's dead. I know Bon and Kurukuru ended up horribly disfigured after their music videos, but they still seem to be alive to at least some extent, given that they're shown moving around in ways that imply conscious thought. But we see Seiki get his head bitten off and his body disposed of in a trash can. According to the rules of the universe, he'd either be fused with Janitor or just plain dead, and either way, he wouldn't need a file anymore. While this theory has the best payoff from a narrative standpoint, there are a lot of holes from an evidence standpoint. To start with a small point, the shirt doesn't match. Seiki always wears a collared shirt, unlike the person in the photo. Now, obviously, he can just wear a different shirt than he usually does on one occasion. So what else is there? Well, I talked about the different animators already, and I think it stands out that if Seiki Otogiri was Subject 1, he'd be the only person, not just on the forums but in the entire music video, who isn't a Ma character. While Wabako references Ma characters throughout Tokyo Ghetto, Ma, to my knowledge, has never referenced Wabako characters on any other occasion. It feels like Wabako was building off of Ma rather than the other way around. Lastly, and more importantly, the majority of the lore from the How to Eat Life novels didn't exist yet at the time Last Dance was made, according to the author. He says he made most of it up himself, with Eve simply guiding him in certain directions.
Although there was definitely something to be conveyed, it cannot be grasped as a clear mass of meaning or a clear flow. I felt that this was also an indescribable charm, but when it came to describing the story from there, what should I write? It was like solving a problem without an answer. Of course, I had many discussions with Eve. A number of ideas came to mind. I received a lot of valuable opinions and advice.
The first novel was released in September 2022, nearly 4 years after Last Dance. So, while I would like to believe the broad strokes were planned from the start, that idea has little basis in reality. The last theory I've seen floating around on the internet is that the file belongs to Rei Tsukumo, the protagonist of Empty Memories. Rei is a high schooler who's considered mysterious to the flower shop, but still has a file that we conveniently never get to see. The first 2 pages of the manga are also pretty suspicious. On the first page, Rei is having a nightmare, and in it we see the files on the floor, including the scribbled out one. That means that although he doesn't remember it, he's been taken in and examined by the flower shop before. Also, he's hidden in shadows, with a shadowy Zengai attached to him. In later chapters, we even see it cover his face. Then, on the second page, we see an illustration of 5 characters: Bun, Karukuru, Platoon, Dancer, and Rei. As of now, none of those first 4 are even relevant to the story. Bun and Platoon get small cameos, but Karukuru and Dancer literally never appear. So isn't it a bit strange for them all to be grouped together here? So, here's the thing about Rei. I mentioned how he's mysterious to the flower shop, right? Well, here's what we do know. 10 years ago, when Rei was a little kid, an evil Zengai user named Yu and a researcher named Kusha caused a car accident that killed Rei's parents. Rei doesn't remember this event at all until someone from the flower shop searches through his memories. And even Yu's memories of it are fuzzy. And despite the dream at the beginning of the manga showing that the flower shop has worked with Rei before, they had no idea about any of this. It's as if the records were scrubbed. It's implied that someone tried to erase the memory of this event, and my money would be on Kusha, as Rei eventually meets him and he ends up being the only one to remember everything. Kusha also seems to have an agenda, telling Rei that he's the one chosen by the shadows who can take everything back, although it's not clear what he means by this yet. I don't think it would be unreasonable to believe this man could have tampered with the records in order to keep the flower shop in the dark regarding his goals, though. Unfortunately, this theory has the same problem as the Seiki one. We have to assume that this lore was planned out 16 months in advance, and that Eve specifically asked for this Easter egg to be included. Is that impossible? Definitely not. I don't know how long it takes for a manga to go from the ideas phase to beginning publication. That was the last of the ideas I found on the internet, but I actually have 2 ideas that I came up with on my own. This first one I came up with after learning that the protagonist of the music video Dark Knight is connected to the lore. I've seen his name translated as Vans, Bands, and Dans. I don't know which one is correct, but I'm just gonna go with Vans, because Bands sounds similar to Bun, and Dans sounds similar to Dancer, so Vans is the least confusing. Anyway, there's a message from Eve talking about him, Dancer, Bun, Karukuru, and Platoon in relation to each other. This was an automatic message that was sent based solely on the mention of Bun, so there was no reason to group these 5 characters together if they don't have some sort of connection. In addition to that, up until the end of the music video, Vans' face is always covered by a Zengai made of black smoke, which is reminiscent of the scribbled out photo, and his shirt matches the photo too. And lastly, this is another character made by Ma, or, well, half made by them. The problem here is that the character wasn't introduced until a year after Last Dance. Technically, Ma could have come up with them earlier, but that doesn't seem likely, as they released concept art after Last Dance featuring Bun, Karukuru, Platoon, and Dancer, but no Vans. The bigger problem in my eyes, though, is that the explanation for the scribbles doesn't make any sense in universe. His Zengai covers his face, so they drew that onto the photo? Why would they do that? While this is an interesting idea, I personally find it pretty unlikely. This last one is another idea I came up with on my own, but it's more of a crack theory than anything else. In Empty Memories, there's a guy named Ryo who can manipulate anyone that looks into the eye of his Zingai, even if it's through a reproduction like a television broadcast. It would stand to reason that a photograph could also work. So maybe the Zingai was in the photo and they needed to scribble it out for their own safety. He's not a particularly important character though, so it would be a really strange payoff. So after all this, what do I think? Personally, I'm still of the belief that Subject 1 is the Demon Dance Tokyo boy, but I'm not as certain of that as I was when I started. At the start, I would have said that I was 100% sure, but now I'd say it's more like a 70% chance. If I had to put them in an order of likeliness, I'd go with Demon Dance Tokyo Boy, Rei Tsukumo, Seiki Otogiri, Vans, and Ryo. I'm definitely gonna keep the Rei, Vans, and Seiki theories in the back of my mind, in case we get confirmation that some of the lore was planned early on. And speaking of Seiki, I'm also working on a video where I go really in-depth with Tokyo Ghetto, as I found myself heavily disagreeing with common interpretations of the music video, so look out for that in the somewhat near future.